Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
Next Saturday, Christmas comes early.
Unbelievable! Welcome to this incredible scene.
Bills.
To the end zone!
Chargers.
It's a touchdown!
An exclusive NFL game.
This is fantastic!
Live in primetime.
Wow!
Only on Peacock.
With a Christmas gift to their fans.
They're having some fun now.
Bills versus Chargers. Next Saturday, 7:30 Eastern. Exclusively on Peacock.
Ghost Hounds. The new album, First Last Time, out now. Get First Last Time now anywhere you get your music. Ghost Hounds. First Last Time, out now. Look for Ghost Hounds on tour in 2024. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and we are recording the morning after Nottingham Forest lost 2-0 at home to Tottenham. Another defeat, another potentially damaging defeat, as the cushion between Forest and the bottom part of the table gets increasingly smaller, and it may well have evaporated by the time you're listening to this. I'm going to be joined by Baz in just a second, but to give you an outline of the game, basically it was a tale of a team who took their chances, with Tottenham scoring right on the stroke of half-time when Richarlison headed in Dejan Kulusevski's cross from the right wing. And then after a horrendous bit of play at the back from Matt Turner, Kulusevski himself scored the second goal midway through the second half before Yves Bissouma was sent off. But Forest couldn't capitalise on that, and it ended 2-0. We'll have more detail on that in just a moment. But before we do, let's just run through the Forest team. And this is an easy one because it's unchanged from the last game. So we had Turner in goal. We had Bolly, Murillo and Neco as a back three, with Williams and Toffolo as the wing-backs. We had Yates, Mangala and Kouyaté in midfield, and Gibbs-White and Alanga as the furthest forward. Baz, another defeat, only one win in 13. We've lost 4 out of the last 5. Has the feeling around the City ground changed?
There was definite a lot of pro-Cooper sentiment within the ground, but you could feel it was quite flat, and like this does feel like the end of the road.
Air of resignation?
Yeah.
I mean, it's notable that, so obviously you were at the game and I was watching on Sky. It was noticeable that even over the effects mics, you could hear at the end, yes, there was the polite applause for the efforts that the team put in, and I don't think anyone's questioning their effort, but there was also chants of Steve Cooper's name.
Yeah, definitely. It's within like the last 2 or 3 minutes of injury time, the 8 minutes added on, that's when the chanting started with his name. But it wasn't as loud as the chanting was with his name at the start of the game.
And I mean, just to skip to the end again, it's also quite noticeable that Steve Hodge on Radio Nottingham, he's usually generally fairly balanced, but generally on the side of optimism. And last night on Radio Nottingham after the game, he had a very different tone of voice, didn't he?
Yeah, he was. I'm going to come back to some of the points actually later on, I think, because I don't think they're what we need to launch with. But he was basically saying it's not good enough. We're not creating enough chances. We're not showing any quality, and the record, no other manager would have survived this long with that record. Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. Let's come back to that. Let's talk about the match. So look, we know that Tottenham are a good team. We know that although they had a little stutter recently, that they are a good team. They roared back with a victory against Newcastle. And They've got a lot of good players, and Postecoglou has done something which is really, like gold dust just in the game of football management, which is he's managed to establish a new style of play and quite a complex style of play for Tottenham in a very short space of time. So the most noticeable thing being the inverted fullbacks, and that's the reason why Jed Spence isn't going to have a career at Spurs.
Mm.
But were there occasions when Forest were the architects of their own downfall? As always, I think that's going to be a running theme throughout the discussion. If we talk about the action now, the first chance went to Tottenham when probably for the only time in the match in the first 10 minutes, Nico Williams let Son Heung-min go. And Son, just his first touch maybe let him down a bit because he was having to kind of retrieve the ball as he had a shot which Turner repelled with his legs without too many problems, I think it's fair to say.
I thought that was a good save. I've just watched it all, the highlights back, and actually I think that's a very underrated save. He did really well with it.
Okay. The second chance...
Actually, I just want to say as well, before that, even before that chance, as soon as the kickoff whistle went, Ryan Yates just clattered straight into Son. He stood himself up, and then Yates went straight into him again. And I think that set the tone for what the way Forest wanted to play.
I did see on on Twitter actually. There's quite a few Spurs fans who were kind of expressing an anti-Yates sentiment, and a Forest supporter quote tweeted that and said, "Ryan Yates rattling opposition fans since 2017." So yeah, and he did that job really well, and we miss that when he's not there. And but yeah, in the first 10 minutes, I thought that Son was going to have Williams on toast rather. But actually, that was pretty much the only chance that created from that position in the first half. Brennan Johnson had a poked sort of snapshot, which was a good save from Turner. He had to get down low to his right-hand side. It was a chance out of nothing, really, but it's an opportunity from Johnson.
I would say, I mean, we'll talk about quality later, but Kulusevski was absolutely outstanding, completely pulled the strings, and that chance for Johnson was made by Kulusevski beating three of our players, just ghosting past them.
Yeah, and Kulusevski started out in the number 10 position, and he, considering that I'd never seen him play as a number 10 until, well, watching Match of the Day last week, he was really, really good at it. And then, of course, Brennan did have a clash of heads, I think, with Willy Bolly, and it looked serious, didn't it? And it was...
He was like for 5 minutes, you know how like you can see a player move when they're on the ground.
Yeah.
He was just completely still.
Yeah, and and initially there was a little bit of kind of he was obviously in pain because you could see his legs kicking a little bit, but then he, you could sense it was a serious injury. He was being treated for quite some time. They kept him still. He was able to get up and walk away, so it wasn't purely concussion they were worried about. Otherwise, they'd have strapped him down and put the blocks on and everything. But there's a fair amount of claret on his sleeve, and he'd obviously had a serious, nasty cut. So although it wasn't technically concussion, it was classed as a concussion sub. And then that saw Spurs change ever so slightly. So Ollie Skip came on and he played as the most advanced midfielder, but he wasn't really a number 10. But Kulusevski pulled out to the right wing, and as with many matches recently, you could tell that Tottenham were trying to target Harry Toffolo, and that kind of did pay dividends in the end. We'll come back to that in just a second, because I think it's also worth mentioning that Forest did have a few moments, bright moments, the most notable being when Williams played the ball up the right wing to Gibbs White. Gibbs White quickly swiveled round, played a quick pass to Elanga, who got in behind the high line. And then Elanga, well, he lacked composure and he made it a very easy save for Vicario. I think the flag would have caught him out anyway, but yeah, in those situations, considering Elanga's got 3 goals already, you'd hope that he would show a bit more composure. And I did say in our group chat last night, Anthony Elanga over the last couple of weeks, I've come to the conclusion, and you might need to ask your dad's kids on this one, but Anthony Elanga is the new Franz Carr.
So again, I thought this during the game, and it was confirmed by watching the highlights back this morning, which was you look at Spurs when they got into our final third, and they'd play like a snatched pass because they were under pressure. The person who received it would have an immaculate first touch and it would take it past one of our defenders. Whereas when we got into the final third, we'd be under pressure, we'd play a decent pass, and then the receiver, first touch, would let it bounce half a yard away from him, and that basically ruined the chance.
Yeah. I would like to come back to a point that you made on our group chat last night, though, which is that Forest have spent £250 million on players in the last 2 seasons. But for a team like Tottenham, that's 3 or 4 signings.
Yeah,
and that level, that
40.
gulf in quality is really apparent, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's I think yesterday the majority of the game we were the better side. We had the beating of Tottenham. Apart from we have no quality up front in the final third, and we make mistakes.
Yes. Would you say that the goal, when it came, Kulusevski was on the right-hand side, he cut in, he crossed it in with his left foot, so an in-swinging cross, and Richarlison ghosted between Bolly and the fullback and headed home? Would you say that that's defensive culpability or just an outstanding cross which is difficult to defend, or a bit of both?
It was an outstanding cross, but it was also the first time that Toffolo hadn't been close to his man. And whether it was a lapse of concentration or slipping or whatever it was, Kulusevski wouldn't have been able to put, it was a beautiful cross, but he wouldn't have been able to put it in if Toffolo had been putting pressure on him. And once it had gone in, again, beautiful cross, great header, and I think Turner could have done better.
Okay. I've seen a few people saying that. And we'll come back to Turner later because obviously there's a big moment that we will need to talk about. One thing that I think is noticeable about the first goal is that Steve Cooper said this is where we didn't stick to the plan. So the plan was basically to double up, and on this occasion, Toffolo was not supported by, I presume it would have been either Kouyaté or Elanga. So when Kulusevski cut inside, which was Toff's first mistake, in fairness, you've got to show Kulusevski out onto his right foot. But when Kulusevski cut inside, there wasn't a second man there to put that pressure on and stop the cross coming in. So it's not the first time we've heard Steve Cooper talking about the plan and whether it has worked or not.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay, so stroke of half time. That was, I think, 45 plus 2 minutes. And how did it feel to go in a goal down at half time in those circumstances?
Again, I thought, and I think the general feeling was we had Spurs rattled. Our physical style of play. There was a few moments in the first half where, like a Niakate long throw or something like that, and Spurs were panicking in their box. And our approach had them rattled. And if we had that little bit of quality, we'd have been the ones that were 1-0 up. So there was a kind of air of resignation that we were 1-0 down at, and we'd conceded just before half time. But overall, the atmosphere was pretty positive.
Okay. So in the second half, obviously Spurs had made that change when they had to bring off Brennan in the first half. In the second half, there were no changes from either team. And basically, the best chance at the start of the half went to Forest. It was some great work from Anthony Elanga. Forest had kind of pumped the ball in. Elanga, the ball came out to him on the corner of the box. And rather than just blindly stick the ball in, he showed that little bit of composure and quality. He took a step, he took a moment, he looked up, he saw Willy Bolly in absolute acres of space in the inside right position. Bolly did the hard bit. He brought the ball down, he controlled it beautifully, he faced the goal, and then the easy bit, which was to keep your head over it, he didn't do. And it was wild, and it was in danger of hitting the top tier of the Trent end, wasn't it?
It was a centre-half shot, definitely. But, I mean, I'd also take a little bit of issue with Elanga there because I think it was Gibbs-White that picked him out. And if his first touch had been better, he could have carried on going forwards and put a shot in himself. But because it bounced off him, he had to spin round and then look for Bolly.
Hmm.
So it's one of those again. That little bit of quality could have turned that into a different type of chance.
Okay. So let's talk about a bit of quality because not long after that, Neco Williams did put in a quality cross. My old favourite, the corridor of uncertainty. He was
Yeah.
is beautifully behind the so is Spurs defence were on the edge of the 18-yard box. Neco was also in that position, and he did that thing where he just got enough curl to put it into that corridor of uncertainty towards the penalty spot. And again, Cooper bemoaned this. Players not sticking to the pre-arranged tactics and plan because there were three Forest players offside, and the one who was the least offside was Alanga. He put the ball in. I mean, obviously, you're in the ground. You probably thought it was a good goal. At the time, I on the telly, I was going, "That's going to be tight," and actually, it was the correct decision.
It was the correct decision. I did think that from where the angle I was at, I didn't have a great view of it because I'm near the halfway line, but I was thinking there looks like a possibility of offside there. So I wasn't surprised when it went to VAR, and I definitely wasn't surprised when it was chalked off.
And he's the new Marlon Harewood, isn't he? Alanga, and he's already been the new Franz Carr. Now he's the new Marlon Harewood, which is a player with his pace just needs to show that little bit of footballing intelligence just to hold that run because he can get behind any defender he wants to, just like Marlon could. And Marlon always used to get caught offside in really cheap positions as well.
Actually, I think I've said this before. There's an interesting. This is a little bit of a digression, but there's an interesting comparison to be made between Elanga and Brennan Johnson because Brennan Johnson could play on the shoulder of the fullback or the centre half, and then when he received the ball, he would burst away from that player.
Yeah.
Whereas there was a point in the second half where, I mean, that happened a couple of times with Elanga, but he didn't burst away from the player. Whereas there was another chance, well, it didn't turn into a chance, but he picked the ball up maybe 20 or 30 yards in their half, and then he ran at them, and he had absolutely had the beating of them. So he hasn't got that initial, first 5 yards of acceleration that Johnson's got. But once he's got a head of steam up, then he can beat anyone. And I think that is a very important difference in how they play and why we're not getting the same sort of thing that we had last season.
Well, again, that's why I'm able to say the Franz Carr comparison because defenders don't like being ran at by players with huge amounts of pace, and that's something that Brennan could do, yeah, sure. But Alanga's at his best when he's picked the ball up, like you say, slightly deeper and is running at the defenders, whereas Brennan played off the shoulder. And I think that actually it's not just about that initial burst; it's also about strength because Brennan bulked up when he was at Lincoln, didn't he? And you saw that in the championship season. You saw that he was able to play off the shoulder because he had the strength to hold off his fullback or his defender, and therefore turn and sort of burst through. So yeah, there is an interesting comparison to be made there. So it was still 1-0 to Spurs, and Neco had put in a great cross, and then Forest gave Tottenham the second goal, and that's when seasoned football watchers have that air of resignation. You and I have talked enough in the years that we've been doing this podcast about what the hallmarks of a relegation threatened team, and this is one of them. The ball went out to Neco Williams in the right back position. He thought about playing it quickly. He didn't. He was closed down. He turned around. He played a back pass to Turner. It was probably slightly too heavy. Son Heung-min absolutely accelerated to close down Turner. Turner panicked, tried to clear it, went straight to Kulusevski. And then actually having said that Toff showed Kulusevski inside onto his left foot, Niakate did exactly the right thing as the defender. He shepherded Kulusevski towards the byline. Kulusevski hit it with his right foot. He managed to get some power behind it, but it went straight through Turner's hands. Turner was in a really good position to stop it. He did the right thing. He put his hands up, but he just let it go straight through him. And all of a sudden it's 2-0. And Turner has to bear the brunt of that. But I would also say that Neco didn't help him.
Well, before the game, or no, actually after Son's chance right at the start of the game, I turned to the bloke next to me and went, this is what it's going to be like Spurs are just going to press our back line and they're going to make mincemeat out of Matt Turner because they're going to press him. And that's exactly what happened for that goal. Is Neco Williams thought he had more time than he did, but Spurs pressed him. So he had no choice but to play it back to Turner. And because he was under pressure, he slightly overhit it. Son immediately pressed Turner. Turner panics and gives it to Kulusevski. I actually thought when Kulusevski shot, it had gone into the side netting because the angle was so tight. He shouldn't have been able to score. But yeah, again, watching it back this morning, Turner gets both hands to it and it still goes straight through them.
Yeah. And Turner panicked. Turner panicked twice.
Yeah.
And so although I'm kind of saying Neco shouldn't have done the back pass in the way he did, Turner still had plenty of opportunity to alleviate that pressure. And
but the key thing is, we knew they were going to do. I knew they were going to do that, and I'm not a manager. I'm not a player.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point. Okay. So 2-0 down, and then not long after that, Forest tried to break. It was a case of it was a set piece. I can't remember if it was a long throw, if it was a corner, but Forest tried to put the ball back into the danger zone, and nothing really came of it. The referee showed Bissouma a yellow card for a late challenge, but then VAR called him over, and of course, with the benefit of being on telly, straight away we could see, he's going to be in trouble for that, and VAR is probably going to tell the ref to have a look, and as soon as the ref has a look, he's going to end up brandishing the red card. And it was it's one of those, it wasn't malicious, but it's the kind of tackle you can't do. It was high, it was late, it caught Ryan Yates with his studs just below his right knee. It's a deserved red card, and in fairness, Postecoglou afterwards, he did say, we've got a problem with getting these kinds of red cards. We've had too many of them already. And of course, it's Bissouma's second red card of the season. Now, let's not talk about the merits of the card. I've just done that. Did you feel that was going to give Forest a route back into the match? Because I didn't really.
Yeah, so the bloke next to me went, so that gives us the numerical advantage. What's the use of that? And I went, it'll be like Brighton where we're all over them but can't put the ball in the net. That's pretty much what happened.
And also what I'd say is that when you're chasing the game and therefore prone to getting caught on the break, then the man advantage makes no real difference anyway. So Forest did make the subs, and they went to a sort of a 4-3-1-2-ish with Wood coming on up front, and also Danilo coming on in the middle of the park, and Gibbs White playing sort of nominally as a 10 behind Elanga and Wood. There's no point putting on the big man up front when he's only going to get 2 touches in 25 minutes, is there?
But he also didn't move very much. I mean, that's another thing. There was a few points where, and I mean, this is a factor in the last 25 years, isn't it? Where it looks like the opposition have more players than you because our players aren't moving.
Well, the other thing, which is a truism, is that when the opposition have got a man down, you make the ball do the work because there's more space to play with. So a combination of ball movement plus player movement, neither of those really happened, and Tottenham did continue to look threatening on the break, even though Forest put pressure on. But I think it's worth pointing out that the 2 best chances came in the last 5 minutes one in the last 5 minutes of normal time. It was a corner coming in, a deep corner from Gibbs White, probably the best one he's hit this season, I would say. Toffolo, who is good in the air, as he proved last week. He was at the back stick. He absolutely leapt like a salmon above his defender, headed it down, did everything right, and somehow Vicario, falling backwards, it hit his shin and bounced away. Excellent save, but it should have been 2-1, shouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a great save, but yeah, that probably says it all again about the difference in quality between the two sides.
And let's talk as well about the chance right at the end. So Neco Williams, again, ball came in from a set piece. Neco received the ball at the back post. His first effort, he couldn't quite get it. He had to cut back inside.
It sort of got caught under his feet, which
it did
is
a bit.
The same story again.
He did his best to try and rescue the situation, hit the ball low, hit the post. It rolled along the line, hit Vicario, and then kind of came out. Both of those chances, if you're in a decent run of form, both of those go in. When you're not in a good run of form, both of those bounce out. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the way it goes, isn't it? When you're struggling for confidence and form, that's just what happens. Again, it's that same thing, which is a lot of that stuff is, yes, we do really well to recover from the poor first touch, but Spurs don't get the poor first touch, so they don't need to recover. And that buys the defenders an extra half a second or whatever. So Neco sort of got pushed into the byline to make the shot, which is why it hit the post.
Yeah. And again, it's, I'm not going to go all Mark Warburton and talk about fine margins, because these aren't fine margins. These are the differences in quality between teams who are top 6 teams in the Premier League and teams who are bottom 6 teams in the Premier League. Yeah. It's quite a gulf, isn't it?
And it's not a fine margin when it happens consistently week in, week out.
That's also a fair point. Just before we move on and we take a little break, let's hear the view from a Tottenham fan.
Hey everyone, JP from the Cheese Room podcast here to review another glory day for Tottenham Hotspur at the City Ground. 2-0 winners in swashbuckling style. No, it was not. Fair play to you lot. I thought that 2-0 was probably a flattering scoreline for us. The first 20 minutes, I thought we were clearly the better of the teams. We were struggling to break down the low block a little bit, but it just kind of looked like it was just going to take one and would be in cruise control. But then obviously the injury or concussion for Brennan Johnson happened, and that really changed the game. I think for us, it kind of highlighted the lack of depth we've got in our squad at the moment. We had to move Decky out to the right, which just meant in midfield we were really lacking a bit of cutting edge. And I thought you got back on top of the game. And we're probably the more dominant side throughout from that point on. The difference really was just that little bit of quality in the final third. Richie and Decky combining well for a good goal. And then Sonny forcing a horrible error from the goalkeeper, who then followed that up with another horrible error to be beaten at the near post. So, happy to get away from the game with 3 points. What we're not happy to get away from the game with is another 3 players likely to be unavailable for us next match. Hoping that Brennan is all right. But, Udogie picks up his 5th yellow, so he misses a match. And Bissouma's stupid tackle means he is now missing another 4 matches. And we probably won't see him until after the AFCON, which is going to be really challenging for us over the next period of time. I will say, though, Jared Gillette, where's the Aussie Union, mate? I thought that we were going to get a good rob of the green with you. Keep the Aussies together. But I think you were probably overcompensating for your nationality, mate. I think that Udogie and Sarr in particular's yellow cards, I'm pretty sure Ryan Yates committed about 8 of the same fouls. So where's it at, mate? Anyway, wishing you all the best for the rest of the season. It's great having Forest back in the Prem, and long may it continue.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
'Tis the season for festive football. And what's the best way to watch it? Well, it's down at your local Green King Sports Pub, of course. After all, Christmas is a time to catch up with your friends, old and new, and to get to your local for a pint, some food, and live action of every Christmas cracker when it comes to Premier League football. Each fixture from TNT, Sky and Amazon is live at Green King Sports, which means wall-to-wall action on the huge HD screens. So head to your local Green King and watch every winning goal, top bins volley, and yes, dodgy VAR decisions in an atmosphere worth sharing. Download the Green King Sports app and you'll receive 10% off drinks every single time there's sport on the telly. And you'll be supporting us here at 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. Now, it's back to your match report.
The 1865 match report.
Welcome back to the 1865 match report. We are talking about Forest defeat to Tottenham. We've already covered the details of the match, and thank you to JP from the Cheese Room podcast for providing the view from the away end. Not entirely sure I agree with everything you say there, but hey, you know what? We're both biased, aren't we? Baz, do you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, I'd say there's two reactions I've got from JP's little piece there, which is one, we were thinking actually the referees allowing Spurs to get away with all sorts. They were, every time they were touched, they went down, which is fair enough. You expect them to do that, but there was a few occasions where Yates stayed on his feet when a Spurs player would have gone down, and we'd have thought that would have been a foul. And yeah, Yates was very, very physical, but I don't think the majority of the Forest fans would have said the referee was biased in favour of Spurs. They'd say it was against us. So that's probably a sign he got it right. If both
I thought the ref was fine.
Yeah.
Actually, Jared Gillett is a ref who I quite like. I think generally he tries to be lenient and tries to let things flow when he can. Obviously, there is the issue that all refs face now, that with VAR, kind of the spectre of VAR there. I think refs maybe let things go in the hope that VAR will correct them. But actually, I thought the ref was fine.
Yeah. Then the other thing is Ange's "it's just who we are, mate" comment. It was very noticeable that he was not that way. They basically played 6-2-1 for the last 20 minutes of that game, and it was a proper full-on rearguard action. It was not Ange ball as we know it. So I think that says a lot about the way we put them under pressure, which JP obviously picked up on.
Yeah. Let's go back and talk about Forest. I've mentioned about Steve Hodges' comments. Let's go to a few other comments from people, and then you and I can, I suppose, try and make sense of the situation. So our very own Tom Newton said, the form is atrocious with one win in 13. Cooper is basically just chucking things, that might not be the phrase he used, at the wall and hoping it will stick. We look devoid of ideas. I sincerely wish it could be turned around, but I can't see it. I think Cooper has hit a ceiling and a change is due. We've had some comments on Twitter as well. So we've had Martin saying, we are worse than last year. The goalkeepers are worse. Alanga isn't as good as Brennan. We've kind of already touched upon that. And crucially, the novelty is gone. We aren't anything like as motivated. And January will be a massive problem with players away and so on. Beardo says, lots of huff and puff, but a real lack of quality in key areas again. Nicholas says that, Toffolo sat off Kulusevski and allowed him to play too much. I think, again, we've already covered that, but we need more ideas in front of goal. NFFC stats say keeper and striker, two positions you have to recruit top-level players, not deadline day panic buys. Corby says quantity versus quality in terms of the signings we've made. You cannot rely on hitting teams on the break when you have a suspect defence and keeper and have no striker at home. Boscombe says everything was in place with the exception of a Premier League standard striker and, so I'd say, a keeper. And Woolerton Red says that he reckons that Cooper's been let down by summer recruitment. The club messed around for too long chasing Henderson and ended up signing two number 2 goalkeepers. So there's quite a few recurring themes there, basically quality at either end of the pitch. What do you make of that, Baz?
Yeah, and again, so I will return to it now. We've spent, like Steve Hodge on the radio was saying, the owners put a lot of money in. We've spent 250 million quid on 40 players, and that's the bare minimum, it seems, you need to spend to get to a very, very low Premier League standard. And if you think of, 250 million quid, how many players would Spurs buy for that amount of money?
So that averages out as £625,000 a player, apparently.
Yeah.
That can't be right. That may be 6.25 million. I think I've got my numbers and my decimal points mixed up. But
if it was Manchester United or Manchester City, that's two players that we've spent.
And £6 million is nothing for a Premier League player.
Yeah.
You're not going to get anything
£6 million
decent.
is like a top range championship player, not that's a relegation.
Lewis Grabban cost £6 million, and he wasn't top level championship. He was good.
But so like And I mean, I remember this at the start of the season. Obviously, Forest made a big deal about signing Sangare. And I remember reading an article somewhere or the other, and it was one of those about football data. And it was talking about why central midfielders are the most prized thing in football at the moment, with Declan Rice and Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez and all that sort of thing, the amount of money being thrown around for them. And it had like a table of stats of like several the central midfielders that had arrived in the Premier League. And Sangare's stats were awful compared to all the rest of them. And there was a quote from an unnamed agent saying, yes, there's a reason that Liverpool were interested and chose not to buy him. And that's because he's going to give the ball away and he's not very good defensively. That's why he's gone to Forest. And so 30 million quid doesn't necessarily buy you like a top rated player.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, you look at what Liverpool actually did do instead. They signed McAllister and they signed, what's his name? Szoboszlai.
Oh,
and Gravenberch, yeah. It's one of those things whereby I think, let's have a look. So the McAllister deal, McAllister's the one who's playing as the number 6 for Liverpool at the moment. It's going to be approaching 60 million in total. So the initial fee wasn't much more than Sangare, but it's going to be double that by the time they finish paying for him. Again, there's a world of difference there, isn't there, in terms of what you get for that money?
Yeah, so I think for Steve Hodge and some general fans and commentators to say we've got this extra quality this season, actually we haven't. We're not that good player wise. So what we need is that digging in and having the belief and whatever. And for whatever reason, it's not really come together. The much vaunted new style seems to have destroyed the belief, and then we're finally showing some of it, but without the confidence and without the quality, we can't actually do anything other than huff and puff a lot.
The other night, I was invited onto the Let's Talk EPL show on YouTube, and we were talking about Premier League generally, not specifically about Forest all the way through. And I was saying about Luton, the general consensus, we want to see Luton do well. It's nice when a team come in who are kind of those plucky underdogs and everything. But Luton are a team who, apart from possibly Andros Townsend and Ross Barkley, are seasoned pros. I mean, you can tell that Andros Townsend is a seasoned pro by the fact he wears Townsend Senior on his shirt these days. But apart from that, they've got all the fight, they've got all the spirit, but they haven't got the quality. And again, you and I have seen before that you can have all the fight and all the spirit, but once you start losing every week, that diminishes and it wears you down. And so unless you've got serious amount of quality throughout the team, that you're going to go on a slide. And Forest seem to be on that slide. And everyone talks about 1 win in 13, but Gary Neville made the point on Sky Sports that those first 6 matches before the Villa game were getting draws. And now those matches which were draws before the Villa game, which is obviously the kind of anomaly in that run, those matches that were draws are now losses. And the fact that we're having a decent standard of performance and tactically you can ask questions about it, but there's spirit in the performance, the standard of performance is good, the competitiveness is good, it's just that lack of quality at both ends. So that's something whereby there's it seems to lead to an inevitable conclusion, doesn't it?
I mean, the question to ask is, what can you do to change it? And one of the points Steve Hodge made on the radio was, when you're in this situation, the players, no matter how much they try and believe and how much work they put in, they're going to have that same feeling of resignation, that air of inevitability. We're going to run our hearts out for 100 minutes and we'll lose. And that's when you need to make some sort of other change to kickstart things and move things on.
Okay, so talking about other changes then. So we've just signed this set piece coach, and he's not been in place long enough to make any difference. But one thing that was noticeable is that, especially from near Carte's, so most of the corners, apart from the one that I mentioned earlier, most of the corners still didn't get past their first man. But near Carte's throws, Bolly won, I would say, 90% of the headers in the box. So why weren't we getting the second ball?
Exactly. There's a really. So I was listening to Radio Nottingham as I was walking up to the ground, and Colin Frey, actually, I don't know if you heard this, Colin Frey asked Steve Cooper, and he said, so obviously you've got a new member of the coaching team coming in, a set piece specialist, and set pieces have been a problem for Forest all season. Just look at the number of goals conceded, the number of goals scored. And you could just hear this flash of anger in Steve Cooper's response. And I thought that was really interesting. He went, there are many ways I could answer this question. Obviously, if you look at the stats, and goals against and goals for are the most important ones, then it doesn't necessarily look good. But there are many ways to approach this. And I think this set piece, I think Steve Cooper's happy with the set pieces, and he feels this is an imposition on him.
Do you think that it's because Cooper likes to place trust in the players? So rather than saying this is how we should do things, is saying, look, Morgan, you know those corners aren't good enough. Toff, you know you need to beat the first man, and leave it, put trust in the players to do that.
Probably, but the it's very, very rare that you hear Steve Cooper not be positive about the way things are going. Like earlier on, later on in the interview, he was talking about how we're growing the staff, how we've got a better communications team and all these things, and how that's really important and it's part of growing the club. But that one question, and he didn't seem happy with what had gone on.
Now, as ever, there's always a lot of the speculation about the gaffer has been driven by the media. But what's interesting is that I think the way the vultures are circling in the media seems to me to have taken a slightly different turn. So in a similar way to, and I promise this will be the only political allusion that I shall make in this match report, in the same way as Boris Johnson famously had two articles, one if vote leave won and one if vote remain won. I've heard that there are some journalists who are well connected enough to the club who've basically got their obituaries prepared, but also have articles prepared for the eventuality of Cooper staying in the job. Cooper has been a little bit chippy a couple of times in interviews. So he's obviously, as much as I genuinely believe him when he says he doesn't think like that about the pressure, it's going to get to you, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the same thing as if, as if you have a younger sibling or a child who's constantly poking you and saying, but. And the other thing is that Paul Taylor, you could argue the contents of the articles end up being a bit recycled sometimes, but Paul Taylor did make a point in one of his articles this week of saying the relationship between Cooper and the big guy has become a little bit more distant. Now, whether that's down to the fact that the big guy is putting more trust in his son to spend time at the City Ground and be the main focus of communication with the manager or not, or whether you could read it the other way and say that actually the big guy and the manager aren't getting on so well and Cooper's only in the job because the big guy knows that it would make him look bad to sack a popular manager. Take your pick.
But then there was Danny Taylor, who I know our Tom's got issues with, saying that the relationship between Cooper and Marinakis Senior has been strained for a very long time. So, but obviously Danny Taylor, we make the point, Danny Taylor pops up when things are going badly, and John Percy pops up when things are going well. So,
So you said that something has to change. A couple of things that we could talk about. Players, we can't sign any players for at least another 3 or 4 weeks. And we've got AFCON, so we're going to lose a big chunk of the squad. How damaging that's going to be to the squad, who knows? Cooper has gone back to a tried and trusted lineup, so it's noticeable that, with the exception of Alanga and I think Murillo in the outfield positions, obviously he had to make a change in goal because Turner and Vlachodimos are both new players. But in the outfield positions, there's only 2 new players from this season, and the others are, I suppose, trusted players who kind of saw through the fight the last season. That's not a coincidence, is it?
No. Again, to talk about Steve Hodge, he was saying those other players are going to have their noses put out of joint by being dropped like that. But yeah, you can see the difference in the fight. I didn't see the Fulham game, but I did see the Everton game, and we looked very, very flat and not really up for it.
If you thought that looked flat and not up for it, then be grateful you didn't see the Fulham game.
But yeah, yesterday you couldn't say we were flat and not up for it. We definitely had lots of fight and spirit, and I'm sure that's because of the players that Cooper selected. They're the ones he can trust. I also think actually playing a back 5 or back 3 is a brilliant idea because our best player is Murillo, but you can't trust him in a back 2 because he's too young and he makes the odd mistake. But having him in a back 3, you can build the side around him.
Well, maybe not the too young bit, but you could say that about all of our centre-halves. Yeah. They've all got a mistake in them, haven't they? Let's just cut to the chase then. So there's two likely variables. One is you change your players. We've already changed the players in terms of what we've got available to us now, but there's a transfer window coming up. I still remain of the view that Marinakis's approach to running a football club, which is to throw money at it and sign lots of players and hope that some of them are good enough, is not a sustainable strategy. That's my personal opinion. Other opinions are available. I'd just like to point out that I don't live near a bakery, although my parents-in-law live in Watnall. So if the Hovis plant goes up, then you know why. The other variable is to change a head coach. And of course, there's a third possibility, which is that you do A plus B.
Yeah. Well, I think if you change the coach before the transfer window, it will be players as well. I do think this game is, we've spoken about it all the way through. This game is proof that our recruitment wasn't great. We don't have the quality where we need it. We're overstocked with central midfielders, not necessarily great central midfielders, but we don't have any cover for Taiwo. We don't really have any cover for Alanga or Hudson-Odoi if either of them go out for any period of time. We don't have 2 decent keepers, and it's just the entire thing is unbalanced, and we're missing. We're still a step below where we want to be, or where we maybe feel we should be.
Do you think that we're in relegation trouble?
Yes.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Baz. Thank you to all the listeners who've tweeted in with your opinions. And thank you for sticking with us. We'll be back with the Friday 5 on, funnily enough, Friday. So that's our new show where we discuss the top 5 stories that are coming out of the City Ground. Naturally, the big guy chose to wait until we just released that to our feed before refinancing the club. So we missed that one, but we will cover that in the future. Just for the sake of argument, as say, Forest are still, at the time of recording, 16th in the table, but Everton are breathing over our shoulders. And then Luton are 5 points behind in the last relegation spot. So we don't know what the table's going to look like by the end of today. Next match is at Bournemouth. So as well as Friday 5, we'll have a match report after that. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be with you very soon.
Podcast Network. Looking for a fun way to win 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/play100 and use code play100. That's code play100 at prizepicks.com/play100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.